If the way they're living is contradictory to what they're teaching, we must question what they're teaching. I had a teacher on some Facebook meme that I saw who says, "Oh, just remember us gurus, I'm one of them. We're just people and we make mistakes too." Okay, well, harming people over 50, 60, 70 years is that's not a mistake, that's a lifestyle. Trauma does not age well. Trust me, I'm seeing that in all kinds of places, not the least of which is all these former Landmark leaders and staff members that are now, gathering around me who are just like, help, help, help.
Mm.
We're not, we're stuck in some kind of something that we don't understand. We don't know how to cure. And, we're starting to see in this, we're doing some great work with Rachel Bernstein in a group, but it's not just about what happened while we were there. It's actually what didn't happen is sort of being the more showing up as the more generally damaging thing of being participating long term in groups like that is you're getting this false sense of healing, this false sense of I'm doing something. And I have this great life, and there's this kind of bravado, and I live a life of possibility. And yeah, it feels really good. I'm not going to lie.
Let's play
Sometimes I actually
pretend.
miss it.
Let's all be
Yeah.
teenagers and play pretend. Let's
Yeah.
pretend that this is great. And instead of developing a self, developing a unique personality, deciding what it
Hmm.
is you like. I'm a painter fundamentally. That's what I am. This stuff's just a hobby. Um, and
I thought it was drummer, a
yeah, I'm a drummer,
musician.
I'm a singer, I
You're
write
an
poetry,
artist.
I do all sorts of stuff. And it was distracted into this because there were a lot of people who were hurt by Scientology. But um, as a painter, you understand that what you are trying to do is find out what you like. You're not trying to paint a picture. You might be trying to paint a picture to satisfy a client or what have you, and that's called selling out. But if you're actually going to achieve anything unique, what you have to find out is your preferences, your biases, what
Hmm.
you like. And that somebody will look at that and go, oh, that's a Picasso, or that's a Matisse, or that's whatever. You can tell that mind did it because they said, no, this is the way I want to do it. Now, I would say that it's an analogy for a musician, any kind of creative artist. You have to find your own voice. You have to find out who you are. Guess what? That's true for us all. Not
Yeah.
if I'll eat beef stroganoff because the leader says it's what I ought to eat, but I'll eat beef stroganoff because I don't mind killing cows, and I personally would go out and do it myself if I got the chance, but there aren't any around the house. No, you do it because it's a decision you've made and you dig into your life and you say you don't feel you have to justify your tastes. That you have to explain that because the leader doesn't like it's like all the scarves in Nixium, all the
But
colored
don't
scarves.
you
These little awards that tell you, oh, you're right, wearing the right color, so you're now an important person. You've got this medal, you've got that. When none of that matters, when it's about you being comfortable with yourself, you not not only not lying to the world, but not lying to yourself, which is what cult membership is. It's this idea of, yeah, this person in Scientology, it's very simple. Scientology promises you self-determinism. Self-determinism will mean doing
Landmark
exactly,
promises you self-expression,
yeah,
full
exactly,
self-expression.
exactly what Ron Hubbard thinks will be what you think. If you disagree with any of it, you're not self-determined. And it's like, sorry, pal, doesn't work for me.
That's the part people don't see about the landmark lexicon because most people don't participate at that level. It's not until you get into a leadership role or a staff role in that organization that you encounter that. Up until then, it is about self-determination. It is about your natural self-expression. It is about you being free of limits and barriers. It is, all these wonderful ideas. And many people, I mean, the least dangerous way to participate in a group like that is do a program and leave. Like don't, don't ever do anything. But then you still need to question the ideas because they're so hammed up, so short circuited. But um,
And we're seeing
like
it, we're seeing
my
seeing it
favorite one is
everywhere.
context is decisive.
Yeah, context is
Exactly.
decisive.
Yeah, exactly.
We're seeing,
Which doesn't take into account so much. Anyway, I can go on my rant about context is decisive, but
yeah, you
about how
can.
it doesn't. Well, here's the thing about this is what people don't understand is like, okay, I know I can teach this shit. The context, I can say how it is for me. I can do that. And that is a kind of superpower in a way. I can say how it is for me. I come from Seattle. I know you use rain all the time. I'm here in the Dallas, Texas area where it's gorgeous, sunny, beautiful day. But I come from Seattle and I love rainy days because rainy days are an excuse to like just hang out and watch a movie and whatever. How I view rainy day, how I view sunny day, yes, that has a certain amount of power. Okay, what it doesn't have context is actually the external circumstances with the internal view, right? But as a woman who spent 25 years of her life as a in a cult group leading, in a particular methodology, I go out into the workplace and my opportunities are limited. They're limited by the dictates of society and the world. Like there's a context out there that is impactful that I have nothing to do with, is what I'm trying to point to. There's no amount of bravado that I can bring to change the fact that as a woman, I'm going to make 82 cents on the dollar. Most likely, not in every case, there's
Yeah, yeah.
few that have gotten banned, but as that it is more dangerous for me to walk across a parking lot at night than it is to you. There's no amount of changing the context that's going to
Yeah,
change that
but
on the
I'm not
individual
going to be
level.
wearing
These
high
are
heels, so
things,
I'm not going to trip over. So of course it's less dangerous for me walking
well,
across
neither am I,
parking
but
lots. Well,
there's
that's
not a,
good.
well, but every woman knows when I said walk across the parking lot, let me tell you what almost every woman in society knows, which has gotten really hard. You need to have your always park under a light, always have your keys out so that you can defend yourself if you need to. And yes, wearing clothes that you can move and run in. We know that. We're taught that from girlhood,
Mm.
that we have to be careful. Do not, jog here, don't walk there, don't do this kind of stuff. Don't look at men, actually. Don't look at men, don't make eye contact, don't touch them. Men are dangerous. All these things. My point about how that goes in with context is this mythos that I can somehow create a way of viewing things. I can create some way of viewing men that is going to limit the predatory men that are going to hurt me
Yeah,
simply because I'm a woman.
yeah. It's
It
the idea
creates
of
a
some
kind of false reality.
supernatural power that we're meant to be invoking that will allow us to control the context, control the environment around us. And that's narcissistic as far as beliefs go. The thought that
Right.
your intention and will controls things around you. And of course, most people believe that. Magical
And
thinking.
that is what the cliche context is decisive. When it's said, that's what's being implied. And it's a shame because in one side, yeah, how I view things is impactful to me. That's a skill that I should use. But the overuse of it will end me up in very dangerous situations and
And
has. I've talked to a number of people, former people who were in relationships where they got hurt. One, her husband tried to murder her. And she got away. He raped her and tried to murder her, and she got away and all this stuff. But in the 2, 3, 4 years ahead of that, all her coaches and the people in the programs were just telling her to create a better context and be more responsible in her relationship. I had somebody last week who's in a relationship with somebody who's clearly engaged in very, very destructive and harmful behavior. She'd had no idea. She finds out. And then, sure enough, her coaches and people around her are like, well, what can you be responsible for that he's doing that? And she called me. I said, I'll tell you what you can be responsible for. Get a lawyer. Do you need help? Do I need to
mm,
fly out and help you? Get a lawyer. Get him the hell out of your house. That
mm,
is a predator. You have a predator living in your house. And at 70 years old, they're not going to change their behavior. There's
no.
no transformation that's going to happen. So,
Yeah, I mean, context is decisive is one of those tropes like the survival of the fittest. And when it was Herbert Spencer who came up with the idea, and he went to his chum Charles Darwin and said, "Oh, survival of the fittest," and Darwin went, "Oh, that doesn't sound like a very good idea." Now, what we've got from survival of the fittest is the Nazis, among many other groups who've taken on, and many right-wing groups now have this social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. In Nazi Germany, that meant that the school system was changed so that the kids who were the most aggressive were the kids who were in charge. And that led to the Wehrmacht and the SS,
That's
worst
what's
of all.
happening in the United States. That's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah,
The
the
people who are
survival
the
of the
most
fittest,
aggressive and shameless.
survival of the fittest doesn't mean survival of the strongest. And I give the example in the book here that if it's what is fitted to survival. So if you have a fire that is driving a lion, a monkey, and a mouse towards a rock wall, then which of them is fittest to survive? The mouse can go through a little hole, the monkey can climb, the lion is done. So survival of the fittest means nothing. Context is
Mm.
decisive, means nothing. They're just thought-stopping, thought-terminating cliches
Cliches,
that
yeah.
when you pull them apart, that they've not actually, all they've told you is it's your fault. Everything that's
Right.
happening is your fault. Everything that's good that happens, you got from the group. Everything
From
that
me,
is bad
from
that's
the
from
group or
me.
the leader, right?
Yeah, everything bad that happens is because you're not doing it properly. And then you look at somebody like Ron Hubbard or Werner Erhard, who lived miserable lives, drug-addled, drink-addled, physically ill. I know certainly with Hubbard that he's smoking 100 cigarettes a day as a role model of the triumphant super being, having you know alcoholism as a distinct. Again, no, it cannot be do as I say, not do as I do. It must be that if somebody is to have, if we're to respect them, then we have to look at the way they live and what they actually do. And
Well,
unfortunately,
and if the way they're living is contradictory to what they're teaching, we must question what they're teaching.
yeah,
I mean, Eve, I had a teacher on some Facebook meme I was telling you about, yesterday or over the weekend I saw who's literally, reviewing my friend Marsha Martin's book and says, "Oh, yes, just remember us gurus, I'm one of them. We're just people and we make mistakes too." Okay, well, harming people over 50, 60, 70 years that's not a mistake, that's a lifestyle. And then, he goes on to say, like, pay attention to what we say, not how we live, because, well, we're just human. And I'm like, what? Like, that is kind of doesn't make any sense. Now, I may examine the ideas and pull some valuable nuggets from them that I take into myself and I go use in different ways. So, but I'm not gonna support with my dollars and my time a teacher who doesn't, not anymore. I did enough already. I've done 25 years of, a little bit more than that, actually, almost 30, of supporting an organization and teachers who turns out were not using their own teachings. And when they were using them, they were using them in ways that were harmful and exploitive. And not saying so. I issue a challenge at the end of my book, like, hey, you could, if you really want to be who you say you are, you could come out and actually acknowledge, wow, these are some things we got wrong, which honestly, over a 50, 60-year period, if you don't come up with some things you got wrong, there's something wrong with you. I mean, I'm 57 years old and I can look back over my life and go, well, that probably wasn't the best decision. That wasn't the greatest thing. Doesn't mean I'm going to change it. Doesn't mean I'm going to the easy one for me is having a son at 15 years old. I love my son. He's a great human and we did all right. And would I do that again? Hell no. I'm the first one. I used to, at 18, I was on an after school special telling people the realities of being a teen parent and why they shouldn't do that. I wasn't running around going, hey, everybody, it's
try
okay. I
this. Yeah.
survived. I did okay. I did survive and I did do okay. And having a child at 15 is not something I would ever advocate for or advise.
No.
So we can come out and say, you know what, we got that wrong. So one
Yeah,
of the
well,
things I'm
I mean,
curious about as I was,
never being wrong
yeah,
is an
go,
aspect of narcissism. Never apologizing, never admitting to wrong. In fact,
right.
George Bush Senior used to say, "Never apologize. It's a sign of weakness." And you go, "Yeah, that's a quotation from John Wayne in She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. And the other aspect about that character is he wants to murder Debbie Reynolds because she's been polluted by the time she spent with the Native Americans. So never apologize. Great. And but they don't. They brag about what they do. They erase the past. They rewrite history so that they've never done anything wrong. You know, you've got all these people with Trump going, yeah, look at the art of the deal, look at the art of the deal. And you go, chapter 9, how to run a casino. Bankrupted. He got the biggest earning casino in the world, and he managed to bankrupt it by the brilliant business strategy of setting up two more casinos in Atlantic City in competition with it.
He's
And you go, you're an idiot, you know.
he's
And
pretty much
yet,
bankrupted everything he's touched. Now he's working hard on bankrupting our country. It's really,
six bankruptcies so
it's
far. But
yeah, it's crazy.
it shows you where it goes. I mean, the 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 essential thing, what I've spent the last year on with this new booklet, I'm sure Spike will put it on the screen anyway, but I was talking with Steve Hassan the other day and he said, I like to hold the book up to the camera. It's like, you know, if that's what gives you a buzz, I'm all for it. There we are. Um, this is the most interesting story I have ever read. It's not because I wrote it that I say that. It's like it is jaw-dropping what happened here, that you can take a belief and you can set it loose in the world with the best of intentions, and then somebody can come and pick it up and run with it. Now, our society is still riven. In the US, most especially, you have neo-Nazi groups, you have white nationalists, white
Oh, rampant.
supremacists,
Mhm.
you know, hundreds of thousands of people who
Worse, we
believe
have
this is.
a Worse, we have a giant population, and I include some of my friends in this, who do not understand that they are perpetuating these beliefs and they don't even know they're doing it. That to me is the most dangerous part. And this kind of brings me around to one of the things I wanted us to talk about, which is education, because
Yeah.
I've invited you to come and be a panelist and a speaker at the Seek Safely Summit, and I am very behind supporting your work. I know you've developed a program for 11-year-olds, to teach them how to recognize some of these things,
Mm.
because I think you're on to something there that is the most important and most leveraged place in which we can make a difference, which is the general population. When the murder of George Floyd happened, and that was life-changing for me in many ways. We were in the midst of the pandemic, which was also, I call it our forced timeout. And I read, oh gosh, what's that? White Fragility
Yeah.
during that time, and came to see even the ways me, Miss Liberal Progressive, loves everybody, make a difference, change the world, unicorn, like woman in a unicorn suit, was unknowingly and unwittingly perpetuating systems of racism. As that when I came to understand racism more as a system than a personality or a belief set. And that's the piece that both opening our minds, this book where you're speaking, I think is so important, and why I'm excited about any kind of educational program you're putting together, because I've known you long enough now to know that you're going to work on these underlying ideas. But that we don't know what we're participating in. We
No.
do not know what we're forwarding. We do not. That's what I got mostly as I'm reading the book. I was like, well, what? Didn't you say? I don't know if I heard, because I've listened to a number of interviews where you've talked about the book too. So the book and your interviews are conflated for me. But at one point, don't you make the point that Aryan actually comes from a Jewish word?
Um,
Am I remembering that correctly? How's that go?
no,
There,
it fundamentally it comes from a word that becomes Iranian in
Iranian,
Arabic.
that was it.
Yeah. Um,
So,
who in fact are the only people in that part of the world who aren't Semitic. But because you had the whole of Levant, Iraq, they're all Semitic. All of the Arabs, they're all Semitic people, but the Iranians aren't. And it moved over. It was given a new meaning by a group of people. I mean, I give Ignatius Loyola Donnelly the spotlight, but he wasn't. There were a couple of people who'd come up with this ludicrous idea before, and he was a really nice man. He was a state congressman, a representative. He was a state senator. He believed in female suffrage, the votes for women in the 1870s. He was appalled when the Freedmen's Bureau to help former slaves was closed down, when Reconstruction was abandoned.
But see,
So he
I
was a
think you're
good man,
making an
and he got this
incredible.
idea, and he said, "Well, there used to be this Atlantis, and it's brilliant. There used to be this Atlantis, and the people there were Aryans." Now, he didn't mean anything nasty by that at all. Then Madame Blavatsky picks up the idea, and she doesn't. I think she was a crank, but I don't think she was a charlatan. I think she was a remarkably, one of her biographers said, the most learned, if not the wisest woman of the 19th century, and she was damn clever. But what she'd garbage in, garbage out. So what she'd absorbed were the
Mm.
secret teachings of the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, Sufis, various Indian fakirs, Mahayana Buddhism. She'd taken all of these ideas, which are meant to be secrets, and published them. And the thing is that her presumption was, as with Hubbard, as with Crowley, as with Werner, their sense of certainty. The way they check whether something's true is they go, "Does that feel true?" Yes. And that's it.
Oh, that's
It's in their
brilliant. That's
imagination.
absolutely brilliant. That's true. That's exactly it. And that's what
Yeah.
we do. We teach people in our course, like, okay, if it feels right to you,
What's true for you
but
is
to me,
true.
that it
L. Ron
feels,
Hubbard. Bullshit. Something doesn't become true just
wow.
because I want it to be true. That's exactly why the human race is in trouble, because we believe nonsense, because we don't examine things and take them down to the root. I wanted the etiology, which is the etiology of all of Heart's, Landmark Forum, Est, whatever, all of the LGATs, all of the other Scientology derivatives, of which there are hundreds, Eckankar, Darfree John, abilitism, the
Right.
silver mind
Yeah, you
control,
said in your
hundreds
book.
of them. They all come out of Scientology, which in turn comes out of Aleister Crowley. It's a reframing of his ideas. No doubt about that. Wrote a paper about it in 1993 called Possible Origins of Dianetic Scientology. I found 60 foundational ideas that were in Crowley. And Hubbard is saying, "Oh, my very good friend Aleister Crowley. He had some great ideas." And we go back, we find that Crowley takes it from Blavatsky and from others around her time, and nobody bothered to check if any of this was true. And the idea is, oh, well, it goes back to Egypt and the Book of Thoth and the Emerald Tablet. They're these magical things that the Egyptians had. And you're going, yeah, and what happened to their society and their great godlike powers, which, of course, in the 17th century, the Rosicrucians arrive out of nowhere and say, "Oh, we've been around since Egypt." We've been around for thousands of years. It's nothing before 1600. Nothing, nothing, nothing.
So what's our way out? What's our way through? So in keeping with our Seek Safely Summit, the Seek Safely, that's my big service project now is to kind
Yeah, yeah.
of is to move this organization into a much bigger lens. Because I think there's many of us that are actually, this is what we're actually trying to talk about. We're actually trying to say, hey, folks, danger, danger, danger. But why are we doing that? Because we want people to be safe. We want people to grow and learn and evolve and whatnot, but in ways that are useful and helpful to the greater society and to our personal needs. And so what do you see as some of the building solutions is our theme, right? Like what give us some ideas of how can we protect ourselves? What can we do as a society, as individuals to avoid some of these obvious pitfalls? Well, I guess they're obvious to us. They're not obvious to everybody. We're trying to make them obvious, but that doesn't seem to be moving a lot as we move
Well,
into even more conspiratorial times currently. But
you can
what can
reach
we
some
do?
you can reach some people, and um, uh, the story is told of the Buddha, and I'm not a Buddhist anymore. That when he achieved enlightenment, it was after days of the god of death, Mara, taunting him, sending his daughters to him, trying to get him out of him staring at things. And the Buddha achieves enlightenment. He thumps the world with his hand, and the whole world shook. It says in the Buddhist scripture, which I doubt somehow, but never mind. He was a lovely bloke, and a big lump on his head as well, by the way. It's one of the 80 marks of the Buddha, along with having, oh, I love this, it's in the Buddhist scripture, and they don't, this is what something they don't put on the posters, but it's in the Digha Nikaya. It says one of the 80 marks of the Buddha is an elephantine penis, which he's not going to use for anything, you know. So what is the point of any of this? But
I don't know
he
when we're
said,
going to get past our obsession with the size of penises, because let me
weird.
tell you,
See,
we
it
don't care.
shows you that it goes back
It's weird.
2,000 years, you know, it's like incredible. The
Yeah.
Romans were the other way around, of course. They thought having a small thing was much more elegant than
Spike, do
having a big
not
one.
use that as the intro.
No, do. We'll get some views that way. So he says tomorrow, I now leave for Nibbana, enlightenment. I'm done. And Morris says, stay. After all this time trying to upset him, he says, no, stay. Teach people. And the Buddha says, men's eyes are covered in dust. And Morris says, on some the dust is thinner. Now, we don't have to reach 100% of the people. If we could reach 1% of the people, if the program that I'm faltering with, because there's so much else that people want me to do, but yes, I have a 12 lesson program sketched out with the first 2 lessons written for children that can go into 4,200 UK schools free of charge. And if those 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, if 1% of them get what's being said, the world will change. That's the problem that frustrates me the most, that I'm watching all of this chatter, all of these people talking about how bad cults are and all this, that, and the other, and going, can we stop that? Let's look at what we need to do. So what do we need to do? First, page 1 of Opening Our Minds, the list of the characteristics of a human predator. All people alive should
Yeah, get
know.
familiar with what we're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, because it is rather
Yes.
obvious. You know, I mean, I'm not talking
Once
about,
you know, right? That's, yeah.
well,
It's
you
not
know,
obvious before you. It's interesting.
you
I
see,
mean, I would just say that's been part of my journey since my book is like, now I know what I'm looking at. And it's like, you can see it. It's really easy to see.
but let's put it into other terms. The first characteristic that I give, because it is they're mean. Now,
Hmm.
you worked with Werner. You know he was mean. So if you
It's
just
very mean.
get that,
Mhm.
it's like mean people are mean. Do we want a society directed by mean people? Obviously we do, because that's what we've got.
And there are not people, part of what supports that, by the way, is that some people need or deserve mean, which is this is where I have a whole problem with the victim blaming thing, that's gotten out of control, but is because part
I
of
don't think
healing.
anybody deserves it, but I think there are people
Yeah.
who gravitate towards it. You have what's called the dependent
Yeah.
personality disorder,
Yeah.
which is you find among suicide bombers, according to Real Murari's incredible work.
But that was the
You will
narrative that
find
they,
more people who have a dependent personality, but they're still very slight in our society. I think
right.
most of us through that sense of belonging. And so it's being able to, first of all, assess the person you're dealing with. I was having a conversation about trust with a friend, a dear friend, the other day, and who's saying, "Oh, we should be trusting in our relationships. You know, you meet somebody new." And I'm no, you neither trust nor distrust. You you gather
That's been a big thing
information.
I've had to deal with is I see the good in people. And so, and one of the lines in Landmark Leadership is it's a quote from Werner. I'm not going to get it exact right now, but it's something about interact with the beauty of people, not the garbage, right? Okay, I really
Coming from
like
a
that.
man
I resonated with that.
a man who had no beauty, that's quite a statement. But there we go.
Yeah, but remember that's very, very masked. It's not until, I mean,
I know.
even I, who was working very closely with him, only saw glimmers and snippets and whatnot of his meanness. I mean, I saw moments. I can count on my hands how many direct moments of that meanness I saw in 10 years.
So the point is
And
that when you see one meanness in a
one,
person,
right.
you make a note of it. Then you go through the rest of the list. You know, the person who's always bragging and boasting. You know, who gives the date of the book. Oh no, no. The person who's always bragging and boasting, beating themselves up. By learning those characteristics and by teaching children that, we don't teach children anything about how to relate to the world.
Mm-mm.
So saying, you know, there are some mean people in the world, And the system of human government from, as far as we know, the beginning of human government till now has largely been, almost exclusively, been autocracy. It's been authoritarian. There are exceptions, thankfully. And I always recommend Graeber and Wengrow, The Dawn of Everything, to everybody because it's an absolute mind changer. Because they show that there have been societies that didn't. So the Indus Valley, Mohenjo-daro, for 700 years, no war. As recent, a neurologist I wrote a nasty letter to New Scientist, which they didn't publish, because they reviewed this neurologist saying that warfare is natural to humanity. You're going, so for 21
Right.
generations, these people didn't do it, so they must have been unnatural. And he then doesn't like pacifists because, of course, war is natural. And you're going, we have to look at what the word pacifist means. A pacifist is somebody who believes you negotiate before fighting. It's not somebody who rolls over when you attack them. And it's now been
Mm.
moved in our society to mean wimp.
What I'm curious about is the way I see it is our only way to work into the kinds of things you're talking about is we have to change the systems. Now I'm kind of a systems
No, no,
thinker. I'm
no,
kind
no,
of,
no, no. You
like we
put the
how else are we going
information
to
to
keep it?
people and they will change the system. The error has always been, and you have to change the system. You have to, before we can get anything done, we have to change the way it's done. No, if you teach everybody about predators, there'll be less predators. You can then, people will quite naturally go, well, when you stand for election to government, you should do the Hare sociopathic checklist revised, and that will weed
Right.
out the
Well, and then put
unintelligent
in,
sociopaths. But the system has to follow the information, and the
well, and it
information
always does,
doesn't
right? You're
happen.
right, because
Yeah.
people create the system. So like what I was thinking of is term limits. So, one of the things I think we're missing enormously in our, in our vision of democracy over here, which I still actually think is a pretty good vision,
Great
but
vision
we've
hasn't worked.
undermined the systems a lot. And we have things like one of the things the last 10 years has taught us is all the things that norms we're keeping in place, not laws. And then things like have term limits. If we had a Supreme Court that had a term limit, could only serve for a certain period of time, then we're
Well,
more likely, people are less likely to be taken over by the sort of power and the avarice that seems
yeah,
to come with that. That's what I'm
I think
referring
it's
to when
probably
I
like
say
I
systems.
think
But you're right, is the people have to change the system.
senility testing would also be useful in
Oh
terms
my
of the
God.
court,
No
and
kidding.
the idea,
No
of course,
actual senility testing. Not could you repeat something you heard me say 2 minutes ago? Like, yeah.
I aced the test. There was a camel, a rhinoceros, an elephant. You do realize that wasn't an IQ test, Mr. President. That was a dementia test. I aced the dementia test. But yeah, also, if you want to have a separate executive, legislature, and judiciary, you can't have your judges appointed by the executive. Duh. It's kind of
Right.
easy, that one. The judges, and in the US, we have problems with judges here, but it is nothing like what you've got going on in the US. Because I worked on something like 150 court cases, many of them in the US, I saw how astonishingly corrupt the US judicial system is. That a judge can be frightened off, a judge can be bought off. I saw these things like where Scientology was going around
Well,
killing.
now we're intimidating him. I mean, judges are having to hire security guards,
Yeah,
and they can't go to their children's sports events and they
yeah,
can't. I mean, it's just really,
and
really
and
gotten.
and so the separation of powers has not functioned. You basically have a president. There was one of the senators after he was elected and before he'd come into power who said, if President Trump says jump, I'm just going to say how high. And you go, oh, this is why
Mhm.
Jon Stewart has said it's like a senior care facility in the Senate. So I think having a
And why
test.
people like us go, it's a cult. Those of us that know what destructive cult looks like go, it's a lot of those same
Republicans
dynamics.
are a cult, Democrats are a cult. In
Right.
both cases, they're cults, and
And they're
they
like
push
battling it out.
push forward their leaders. The idea that Chuck Schumer has any position in our society, sorry, the idea that Chuck Schumer has any, you're kidding me, or Nancy
Good Chuck
Pelosi before him.
Schumer.
So,
I
oh,
know, it's
come
so
on, guys.
frustrating.
So, but the first part is if enough people recognize what a predator is, then you have those people are less likely to be, oh, let's face it, the billy club. Let's face it, the
Mm.
pirates, the brigands, the buccaneers, the privateers who rule the world through their lobbyists, through saying, well, we'll take employment away from your state if you don't. I mean, come on. We've come to this point, and it happened. I mentioned Solon the Archon. I mentioned Cincinnatus. And what they did was they took wealth away from the super rich. That wealth was in terms of slaves, but they took wealth away. They said, as Bernie Sanders the other day said, $1 billion is enough. And it is.
Yes.
Anybody that's got more than $1 billion is a sociopath. Anybody that thinks they deserve to have more than would keep them going for how many lifetimes, 100 lifetimes, is a sociopath. And US society, Trump said, the great, as soon as he started running in 2015, I was like, when was America great? I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't, but when? When's the period he's talking about? And he finally said it in January this year. He said between 1870, why it wasn't 1865, we don't know, and 1913. And one would have thought 1917, US entry into. But let's not argue history with Trump. That's the great period.
With a senile old man.
That's the great period when working conditions were at the worst they have ever been
Right.
post-slavery, when people were working a 12-hour day with no health and safety, where their children are dying in the factories. That's when America was great because you had the Vanderbilts and the Carnegies and the Rockefellers wallowing in cash. That's and building enormous ballrooms, let's face it, you know.
You know,
Um,
it's interesting. I got in a little bit of a back and forth with my partner and playmate Ed Gerwitz, who's a former S trainer, and we're having a really good time. In part because we don't agree on a handful of things, but one of
that's
the
much more
things
fun that way, yeah.
he made this. It is way more fun, but he made this comment about. I'm going to be writing an article about this week, but he made this comment about how we only learn from failure, and I said I don't think that's accurate. And what's interesting is what you just said, like we look back through history and we go, oh, the Gilded Age, that's what we want to have, want to have. But it kind of proves something that I read a fantastic article in the Times a
But does
while
he know
back
anything
about.
about carpentry or painting or plumbing? We only learn by failure. Does he know anything about medicine? We only no, by getting it right, you learn. You've learned how to make a
Exactly.
door. Oh God, that's stupid.
And if you look, but you just pointed out, so one of the things that I read in this article recently was just about how what actually sticks with human beings, what we remember is like the best parts. Now, any
Hmm.
woman who's had a child could tell you this because trust me,
I don't remember
if
that.
you remembered the worst parts of pregnancy and childbirth, you would never have another one. Trust me. So we know that about ourselves. And then we look back in history and we go, oh, this was great. And that was great. I mean, we're just so notorious for this here in the United States. And as somebody who dared to write a book going, guys, I think there's some problems in this do good or make a difference transformational organization that we don't have to dismiss the make a difference transformational part to actually get straight about the harms. We actually have to look at both and see how we can do better. What can we learn from
Yeah.
both? And so it was interesting, this kind of back and forth we got into about, hey, no, we only learn from our failures. I don't think that's actually one, I don't think that's accurate, but true, I think we're not very practiced at looking from our wins either. We don't go, I mean, on a personal level, like I had a big situation a week ago and I got myself into and out of in a very short period of time. And actually, some of the best lessons I got out of it was when I finally switched and started looking at, but wait a minute, what did I do right? I stopped beating myself up about what I did wrong, what I missed, what I didn't see, and I went, okay, wait, but let me just give some equal thought to what did I do right? And that was actually where I had some of the biggest insight. I was like, wow, oh, I actually did really sense that there was something not right with this person that I needed to be protective and wary of. Look at that. My instincts were actually trying to tell me something. I
Yeah.
misinterpreted it, but my instincts, wow, okay, how can I do better next time to pay attention to those instincts? And but it was from looking at what I had to flip my curiosity to at least turn on and look at that side. I just think there's a lot of things that we're really dumb about
Yeah, and I
anyway.
mean that
We're,
that leads to the second part of the program. You start with recognizing human predators, then you look at recognizing their techniques, things like gaslighting, things like making you smaller, things like taking an authoritative position, which I too may be accused of. That they those techniques then go out into staring at things and repeating a word over and over again until you're dizzy out of your mind. Ways of inducing euphoria and different states of mind, awe, fervor, belief. Good stuff on this channel from Yuval Law, which I think everybody should see,
Yeah.
because it's life changing what Yuval has understood about how recruiting is happening. And also the videos with John Hunter, who we've mentioned. Once you've got, so the techniques, the things they'll do to you, both in terms of how they will treat you, gaslighting and that sort of thing, making you small, and what they will do to make you feel high, so that they can say, would you like to sign up for the next course? That's the second
Right.
part. The third part, and there are only these three things in the last 7 years since I started this channel that I've wanted to try and get over. And I really would like to retire when people out there, when you're ready to take over. I'm 70 now. I wanted to retire 3 years ago. And
I'm
instead
working
I
on it, John. I'm working on it. I'm a little behind you, but I'll
ended
take
up
over.
writing another book. And this book came out of a proposal that I wrote, which was to be a book with Steve Hassan for his agent, 4 years ago. And the agent, I'd got various ideas, and the agent said, "Oh no, I want it to be called Extraordinary Popular Delusions." So I reached to the bookshelf and held up a copy of Extraordinary Popular Delusions. I said, "You mean this? It was written in 1842. It's a brilliant book. Everybody should read it. It's quite fat, but it's got lots of good stuff in it, by Charles Mackay, I think he was called." And he went, "Oh, I didn't realize there was a book." And there are three others with exactly that title. It's Extraordinary Popular. So I wrote a proposal about and I spent 3 months grabbing things from all over the place, just the wackiest stories, which most people have completely forgotten now. And I'm not going to say them because they're still my scoop. But there some unbelievable stupidity has happened in the last century or so. Just people have done the most stupid things, and they they have a comedy to them. I spent 3 months working on it. I sent it to the agent. He didn't reply. That's how impressed he was. And so last year I went back to that and went, well, there's a book. I'll write this book. And I found, by the time I was done, I got this book out of it, which was Aryan Belief Leads to Genocide, when you mix it in with a misunderstanding of Darwinism and
Mm.
Wallaceism. Let's not forget Wallace. It was Wallace was there at the same time as Darwin. He was a spiritualist, by the way, which we don't like to admit to, but nonetheless, he found natural selection and worked that out. If you take this idea, it goes from some nice people believing that they are kind of superior, and other people will reincarnate, the Jews and the blacks will reincarnate until they become white people too. That's the nice thought in Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy. That philosophy, by the way, is via Rudolf Steiner being taught in Waldorf schools to the children of Silicon Valley. So it hasn't gone away. That belief then goes through these people and very rapidly becomes a Nazi party and leads to the deaths of at least 50 million people.
That's what I meant by there's a lot of people learning the stuff that you're talking about in that book, and they have no idea they're learning that. I
Yeah.
mean, I have a very dear friend whose daughters went through Waldorf school. He believes in it completely. He's a brilliant man. But they don't realize that they're learning that, just like people don't realize when they're learning from Werner Erhard, they're learning from somebody who's informed by white supremacy, who's informed by these kinds of beliefs. I mean, there's a lot of lines between what you're talking about in your book, and I could see all over Landmark, which have long since, because I can see Scientology all over
Well,
Landmark.
let's
But
take this
yeah,
directly, that the Waldorf schools come out of a philosophy that was used in the concentration camps by the Nazis. There were two concentration camps that used biodynamic farming, which comes from Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy. it was Heinrich Himmler, who commanded 1.25 million troops in the SS. It was his determination that when they had killed 30 million Slavs, that was his objective. They came very close, and they set up the new provinces, the Lebensraum, that it was free living space. It's all about. They demarcated the provinces, and anthroposophy would have been the system that they used in their farming, their organic this, their organic that. So we see the same ideas were used by the Nazis that are being used in Silicon Valley. Now, this is not a critique of the people running Waldorf schools. I'm sure they're thoroughly genuine in what they believe, but they need to understand that the guy who started this, Rudolf Steiner, was a complete nutcase. If you look,
That
and that's a
you
bit of a
just nailed
problem for
it.
me.
This is it's so good. So this is where, John, you're pointing at something that's just so, because my question to you was like, do you think that the good, quote unquote, I hate sorting everything to good and bad, but it's kind of what we got, right? So that the good aspects of some of these ideologies, methodologies, can they be brought forth, and the bad side, the dark side, or the dangerous or harmful sides be left behind? Can that really happen? I mean, that's been kind of my question as I look back over my landmark career. Is like, okay, wait, but there's some good stuff there. Can we save the good stuff and get rid of the bad? And that one answer I keep coming to is not if I refuse to look at the bad, not if I refuse to look at the actual history and how it came together. When I do that, then I can actually see, like, oh, this is the weed, this is the flower. I can start to separate it. But people are so unwilling to look at the bad, the dark side. Like they think it means something about them or something. I don't
Yeah,
know what that is because it's not really that
that
hard for me. So it's a little hard for me to understand why it's so hard for people to go, wow, well, that came from an ideology that, you know, supports a kind of supremacy view of us over them. And, but I
yes,
need to be able to see
Steiner
that.
was a racist. Steiner was a pro-German nationalist, very loudly so. No
Yeah.
doubt about it. He also believed there are lots of his readings from his talks on YouTube. There's one of them where I think in 1913, when he has, of course, taken the a large part of the German Theosophical movement away and renamed it anthroposophy. It is
Mm.
theosophy. He just renamed it because he didn't like the idea that Jiddu Krishnamurti was the Messiah. And a lot of
Mm.
theosophists were upset about that. Jiddu Krishnamurti was quite upset about it and resigned, and then spent a life of luxury, feeding upon his disciples and teaching the truth. But he was not the worst of them. His sexual behavior is profoundly questionable. But the thing is, can we extract what's good? Well, yes, that's the third part of my proposal would be we have to understand propaganda. We have to understand how we're being lied to,
Mm.
and we have to be able to recognize that. And having seen, I mean, Google did an attempt at this about 5 years ago, and it was preposterous what they were trying to teach. It isn't that difficult to check stuff out. People are not learning how to do it. You don't just put a word in a search engine and see what comes up. You have to be able to validate the sources themselves. And I've done a lot of work on that as to how you can tell whether.
Yeah.
Now, if you took a principle like biodynamic farming, for example, and this has got, water's got to go through a figure eight. And I was going to say that in 1913, Steiner gave a talk where he said that they were developing a vaccine so that children would not be able to have spiritual thoughts.
Oh
As
my
yet, this
God.
has not happened. Um, it would, and it mightn't be a bad idea, frankly, because these spiritual thoughts are not doing us any good. There are ways of testing things. So if you take biodynamic farming, I was very surprised that we have a leading horticulturalist here, Jekka McVicker, who has said that you plant during the phases of the moon, which comes from biodynamics. And she represents the Royal Horticultural Society. I'm going, you know, with tens of thousands of gardeners belonging to this society, Why don't you see if the people who stir their compost with a sheep's skull do better? Why don't you check whether planting in the full moon or whenever? Why don't you actually test these things? And that's the next part of it. That we're perfectly capable of testing things. And
Right.
sometimes you can only, you only have enough information to kind of have a hypothesis that something might be right. So you don't, and being able to say, well, I don't fully know. I don't absolutely know. Could be wrong.
Yeah.
Having that position rather than and then the whole thing for me is growing up. The whole thing is becoming an adult, which I think I'm,
Mm.
I'm hoping that in about 12 years' time, I'm going to get there. When I'm about 82. I think I might actually be grown up. I won't be able to see or hear or anything by
Well,
then, but
one of my dear
we have to,
mentors.
and we're not doing that. We're not growing up. We are
Yeah.
believing other people rather than checking things for ourselves.
Right. And checking them for ourselves does not mean just looking to see if it feels right to me.
It absolutely means the
Checking for
opposite. Means
myself
it means
is,
absolutely doing the
yeah,
opposite of that. If something
right.
feels right to me, I really need to check it. This in Scientology is what's true for you is true, which is a horrible rewriting of the Kalama Sutta by the Buddha, who's saying, don't trust anything. And most,
Well, it's funny because landmark is trust your experience, like that experiential
no,
education is better while they're inciting a, hypo manic kind of state, they're putting you deliberately. That's what large group awareness trainings do. I mean, Landmark does not have the corner on that market by any stretch, but they're putting you into this extreme experience and then saying, trust the experience. But what people also don't notice is they're telling you, they're interpreting the experience for you. So you're having the experience and then you're getting from the leader what the experience means.
yeah.
And then, or you're getting a menu. Oh, it could mean this, it could mean Canada, and then you pick the ones off. So whether it's a menu or a direct thing, but it's like, and then it's just from there, it's like the lottery, whether that interpretation actually provides value in your life or not. And that's the thing. So, okay, so I got three things. I just want to make sure I heard this right.
Mm.
Learn to recognize predators,
Yep.
learn about how we are influenced,
They're the
like how
techniques that are
we
used. Yep.
yeah, basically how we are. I love the thing about you keep bringing the physiological responses, right? Like how
Mm.
these physiological responses lead to, um,
Oh,
open
wow. I
us
just
up
had
for
an out of body
manipulation.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did
just
you
open
really?
us up to this huge, and then propaganda. Learn to recognize propaganda. So information that's accurate or inaccurate or being, yeah, which is just so. I've adopted your term. I give you credit everywhere I say it, but I've now adopted your anti-social media term. I think it's so right on because it's such a tool of propaganda and not that some propaganda isn't true, but you better be ready to show me how it is if you're going
And
to put it in front of me,
it's
you know.
it's Soma. The
Mhm.
exactly what Aldous Huxley talked about in Brave New World, that you just keep giving the people Soma, this drug that, and social media has become that, so that people, it's not helping people think. It, you're at the other end of
Mm-mm.
it, you've got, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Justin Sledge and his Esoterica, and I think he's got about 3 million subscribers, quite rightly. And he's a brilliant academic looking at the history of magic, the history of religious belief, or Bart Ehrman, just incredible, looking at the historicity of the New Testament from the perception of a biblical scholar and himself a non-believer
Mm.
now, though a fervent believer when he was doing his studies. But he's not against believers. His position and mine are the same. You get to choose your metaphor of the world. How what you think is happening. Yes, it's all on the back of a turtle that's on the back of four elephants, as both the Hindus and Terry Pratchett said.
Right.
Brahma has a dream, the gods come. You can have your own metaphor of the world, but the last part, the fourth part, is how you explore, how you check things, how you verify. So
Mm.
I got into a very interesting thing. I wrote a novel 25 years ago called Voodoo Child Slight Return, in which I decided I was going to bring Jimi Hendrix back to life. Why not? And he could be this character in this novel, which was about this. cult group in the home counties of England who believed they were reincarnations of the lost tribe of the Canasta, who are part of Cherokee mythology. And so they believed that they were here to destroy the white folks, though they were themselves white folks, you know. And this was great, good fun. But it allowed me to look at how beliefs are constructed and how could you come to this thing and how silly are the things you can believe, how far can you go with this. And the point is to bring us to a point where we can check things, where we can say, well, that sounds like a good idea. So in this book, one of the things that blew me away was going back to the teachings of Captain Bill Robertson, the defected Scientologist who was communicating telepathically with Ron Hubbard. I knew this guy. Over an 8-month period, we had many conversations. And he'd written all of these things which he calls sector operations bulletins about how the Markabians, who are the people who are going to bring Christ for the second time, and the whole purpose of Scientology is to stop the second coming of Christ for real. Hubbard says it. I have the issue where he says it. It's what the book's about.
That's what's so great about your book is all these like it's just this like it's giant research dump
Bizarre.
and you go, what? Like one of the things I saw is the old rumor about that L. Ron Hubbard called for the assassination of Werner kind of could have sort of maybe been true, like through that M2 whatever thing. Like there's a point in there where he definitely got fair game.
R245.
Yeah, and I was
Uh,
like, oh,
I
maybe he
talked.
really did.
I interviewed with the person who was tasked to go into Est and find out why it was so successful. There was no question about anybody eliminating Werner at that point. I also was in touch with one of Werner's aides in early 1991, and Werner wanted to employ me to stop Scientology from harassing him. And this is around the time that his daughter accused him of sexual abuse. Sorry, SA. Spike will have to take that. Oh, it's ridiculous, the censorship, First Amendment, and all of that. But so he backed off. But there was no suggestion that anybody at that time in 1991 that anybody was trying to kill him. So I think,
No, I think that
and
there
it
it
seems
may be
very
true.
unlikely.
Well,
Hubbard
I've
did
now got
issue such orders, though. That is true. He issued
that's what
R245.
I was reading it. I was like, oh wow. The other
So
thing that really struck me was for any of my landmark people out there reading it was again how much correlation there is between what is taught in landmark and Scientology. Like it's just throughout the book and you have a thing in there where you're talking about the Thetans, and all of a sudden I realized, and I've always thought like, oh, they're talking about aliens. No, that was a reference to in Landmark. The correlation to Landmark is the big self, little self. So in Landmark, we talk all the time the big self, the created
exactly.
self, the invented self, the fully expressed self. That's Thetan. This, you, me, and Chris and I just do a straight like undo all the dictionary connections because as I was reading your book, I'm like, oh look, there it is. And then there was several other ideas as you go through and explain the ideology of Scientology. I'm like, oh yeah, here it is. The whole advanced course is based off all the reality stuff. What is a huge part of the advanced course I did, they redid it somewhere along the way. I never did the redone one, but most of their redos aren't really redos. They're just repackages.
No, I mean,
But
the fact that Mike Maurer is at
the
the very
whole
very beginning of Est, that this
mhm.
highly trained Scientologist, and then that Werner is sending people in to train in Scientology so they can do confessionals using an e-meter to make sure his staff are not hiding any money or anything else from him. And you're going, oh yeah, this is a humanitarian enterprise. Returning to Captain Bill, I stopped reading his sector operations bulletins, these madcap things that he claims he's telepathically receiving from Hubbard. And he was. Hubbard called himself the Commodore. His wife was the Deputy Commodore. She went to prison for him, leaving Captain Bill, the second Deputy Commodore, theoretically the head of Scientology. So, he was a very high-ranking guy. He was had ship's papers as a captain. He was a qualified civil engineer, all of this. I stopped reading his sector operations bulletins, his SOBs, when I had got to know him and went, oh my, he's mad as a coot. He's
Cuckoo.
crazy. So there's no way. but he wrote one after that, which I only read, you know, during the course of writing this book. And I've printed most of it because it's just incredible. And there's this little explanation. Hubbard says that the great episode that caused our civilization happened 75 million years ago. And that this is the point where the Thetans, the spirits, beings of people rounded up from, I think it's 179 planets in this sector of the galaxy, were brought to Earth and blown up in volcanoes and clustered together and implanted with ideas like Christianity. That, according to Hubbard, is where Christianity comes from 75 million years ago. And there's this little note where Bill's realized something that I'd worked out, which is that the date's wrong. He's thinking about the Chicxulub meteorite, which hit to the Gulf of America, as it's now called, in the Yucatan Peninsula. Yep. And this happened 66 million years ago. And Captain Bill makes this note, and I think it explains Blavatsky, Crowley, Earhart, all of them. He says, yeah, the scientists have got the date wrong because Hubbard checked it using an e-meter. And you're going, the scientists have radiocarbon dated the layer of silt that was laid down. And that radiocarbon dating is now pretty damn accurate. You know, the decay of carbon-14 runs like a clock. And it's been checked and refined against tree dating, tree ring dating, you know, all of this. 66 million. They're wrong because L. Ron Hubbard, using a machine that basically tells you how you feel. Do you feel it's true?
Right.
Yes, I feel it's true. Therefore, it's true. Madame Blavatsky, Crowley, they're just people who say it's true because it feels right. They are fundamentally what we call transmediums or channelers. They're people who've connected into some aspect of their own mind and decided that the truth resides there. And whatever that, you know, and Hubbard admits it. There's an early book called Dianetics, Evolution for Science, from an article he'd published, where he talks about using automatic writing. And that's channeling.
Oh my goodness. It seems like the biggest thing we need to, if we just understood our ability for self-delusion, like if we just start there and then just keep asking questions and keep looking. And, you know, we talked earlier about knowing who I am, but that's not ever happening in a vacuum. Like there's just me over here, you know, there's me in a dance with you, you know, me in a dance with the desk on the floor and the dogs that are roaming around, actually asking to go out, which probably roam out pretty soon. But the whole, you know, it's all of it. And this ability that we have as human beings to imagine and see what isn't there can be both miraculous. You know, we can imagine a man on the moon or whatnot. We can imagine a world. I personally work on imagining a world in which all people have the opportunity to be housed and be fed and be cared, you know, be loved. That's amazing. And that same ability gets us in all kinds of trouble.
You can sit at £100,000 piano and go, imagine no possessions in your colonnaded mansion.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah, but it's like that same ability. A partner and I recreated a course. We called it Imagining in Action. But that was one of the things we talked about was the downside of imagining. Like how that very same capacity we can use to create is also the capacity that drives anxiety, that drives all kinds of mischief. And to me, that's my fundamental thing is I need to understand the ways in which all these things can be used for both their good and evil uses. And that's sort of fundamentally what I'm about. And I really appreciate, so your book, I've read most of it. I'm not all the way to the end, but just full of sort of startling revelation after startling revelation. So much, like everything you write, so much to think about and so much to understand. And I think at a really good time, you know, we need to, as I sit over here in a country that is currently operating in all kinds of very sort of cruel and vindictive ways and harmful and unkind and sending ourselves backwards. I mean, that's my other whole thing. We're just sending ourselves backwards into so many problems that we just don't need to. So to me, books like yours are really essential during this time so we can understand, well, wait, we've kind of been here before, and this is where some of those ideas come from. Let's understand that so we know what parts are chaff and what parts are grain. And
Yeah.
so that you answered my fundamental question, which was really, Jon, can we grow beyond these foundations, you know? And anyway, you've actually answered that throughout this conversation, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And hopefully, I mean, I for a long time have been banging a drum and for decades now. And I've had clever people dismiss the idea, but for me, the idea is very simple. If we want to have an environment fit for human beings in the future, then we have to stop fighting wars.
Mhm.
If we want to stop fighting wars, and you look at just how many of our resources, in the US, you have more than 1 million people engaged in military pursuits, incredible fortunes being spent, while you still have people who need food stamps. Um,
Which
looking at
we're
what's
currently withholding.
Yeah, if you look at what's happening in the Sudan, 20% of people live below the poverty line in the United States, the wealthiest country that has ever existed. And yet there are other individuals, we're now talking about Musk having $1 trillion, which I'm sure he'll use wisely and well on ketamine. Um, so if we are going to save the environment, we have to stop fighting wars. If we're going to stop fighting wars, we have to stop believing the propaganda. We have to stop
Yeah.
believing the warmongers. We have to stop believing the people who tell us that we should hate some other part of humanity, that we should destroy some other part of humanity, that some part of humanity that does not believe as we believe or look as we look is in some way inferior. And the Nazis absolutely disproved this hypothesis and left a devastated world. So that means that the problem in our society is fundamental. It's authoritarianism. If we can get rid of
Yeah.
that, we can stop war. If we can stop
All
war,
kinds of things. Yeah.
then our grandchildren will actually have air to breathe. But
Yeah.
with Putin testing nuclear weapons and Donald Trump quite capriciously on one of his,
Well, I want to do that.
yeah, we're going to test some now, and I'm kind of going, how many do you have to test to work it out? Is if we learn from our failures, as your man suggests, the 1800, that's the real number, by the way, 1800 nuclear tests have happened since 1945.
Yeah.
1800. It's like, haven't you worked out, it's putting this stuff into the air. Yeah, you heard of radioactivity?
Well,
We've all of us got particles in us that come from those tests. It's not helping us.
this is
And
where if
yet,
you actually listen to that, the entirety of the snippet that of Trump saying that, he actually says in part of it that we already know we can annihilate ourselves and we should stop. He very regularly says both sides of the arguments if
hmm,
you can stand to listen all through all the nonsense like long enough, which is very, very difficult. But he'll say both sides of the argument of things. So he literally says in that quote, yeah, we actually know we can annihilate ourselves. And
let's do it.
then he babbles and babbles and babbles. And then he goes, yeah, so we should test too because those other guys are. So it's just like, oh my gosh. And then people look at that and they go, oh, that's leadership. That's the part I have a hard time with. And that's why I'm so on board with, you folks like you and Chris and whatnot that are about educating people about how we can be manipulated, how we can be tricked, how we can be, Chris's new REM model, Chris Shelton's talking a lot about why we can be tricked, what are those kind of emotional needs, what are those sort of moral convictions and things that get twisted and distorted and used, but the how we can get tricked and how we can be so easily manipulated is really important. And to me, that's what your books are speaking about, opening our minds and this one both. They're like, oh, that's how that happens. And here's how I can prevent it. And that's why we're excited to have you as one of our speakers on the upcoming Seek Safely Summit. So I hope folks will
Which
come and
is
join us
what
there because
the
I'm going to be diving into how do we educate 11-year-olds? How do we, not just 11-year-olds. I mean, aren't we all kind of 11 years old? I sort
well
of
that
feel like
that
that's where
that's the kind of age we have to get past.
development is.
I've often said that anybody leaving a cult will be 12 years old. because it's at the beginning of adolescence. It's the point where you still hero worship the parent and haven't
Yes.
got into rebellion. And then you watch people leave and they kind of, start smoking dope and criticizing the leader. And, you get, oh, this is interesting behavior. And you can watch them develop fairly rapidly, usually through their teens, to the point
Yes.
where they go, actually, how about we help the people that are being harmed? How about rather
Exactly.
than creating new conflicts, which is what's happening, we help the people to escape who've been harmed? And I would love to be involved in that. And I've tried to be involved with that. And you know, when Chris a year ago came to me and said he was writing a book about recovery, I wrote him a list and said, please read these things that I've written because I've spent the last 40 years
Yes.
everything I've written is about recovery. This book is about recovery because,
Yes.
in fact, opening our minds, I was delighted to find that a very significant counselor who might not want to be named in Japan, and Christian Churko, who to me is the greatest of all of the recovery counselors, they use Opening Our Minds as the first book they give to people when they leave any cult. They say, this will help you.
Oh, wow, that's great. I had my whole group. We're about to officially flip. A group has formulated around my book, and I told them, I said, okay, we've gone through my book enough already. I'm bored with that. Let's now go into other books, and Opening Our Minds is one of the ones on the list. We're going to turn it into an actual book club. So that's why I'm saying we're going to. I have some ideas, John. I have some ideas, and I'm very. I'm on the team. I'm on the
Yeah,
team
I know it. I
to
know
take
it.
all this
Yeah.
because you guys have done just some amazing work, and we need to get it out there a lot more. So I need to actually get going because my somebody's waiting for me. But um, yeah, thank you for writing. It was reading this book is both wow, kind of upsetting in that like you're kidding me to I keep just thinking like these people are insane. How come nobody can see they're insane? They're insane. These are insane
Mm.
people. And Rachel Bernstein recently had a guest on that's got a very radical approach to addiction, which I'll just say simply is about giving people accurate information. And
Mm.
when they have accurate information, starting with that alcoholism is not a disease. Not to give away his punchline, definitely still worth listening to because you're like, what? Anyway,
Mm. Of
but to
course it is.
me, your book kind of reminded me of that. Like when I get the real information about not these guys, not the Hubbards and Werners, that's interesting, but more what are these ideas that they picked up on and how they use them has been very useful for questioning the
Mm.
ideas, which is where the real value comes. Questioning the people, that was a quick thing. Oh, beats his employees, steals their money. Then, okay, yeah, I'll take, I'm not going to be friends with him anymore.
Mm.
But questioning the ideas has been the more important and valuable
Yeah.
part. And to me, that's ultimately what books like yours give me the opportunity to do is question the ideas with enough entertainment and shock value to keep my attention.
That's the main thing. Good stories. That's what we
Yeah,
we respond to as people.
exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
it's been grand as ever, and it's what January the 10th, the summit, the grand summit meeting.
Yes.
So
Yep.
everybody make sure you're
We'll put it in the
available.
show notes.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
grand.
I'm
Lovely
very
talking with
excited
you.
for your participation.
It'll be fun. Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.